Return now to the topic of distributive justice. Back when we first saw Aristotle's account of distributive justice in Book 5 of the Nicomachean Ethics, one kind of stumbling block that we ran into was that it was unclear how his theory of distributive justice applied in the political case, how it applied to political communities. It was pretty clear how it was working in that illustration I gave you of a basketball team, right? And how distributive justice renders different playing time allotments fair, right? So LeBron James should get all the time, and I should just be on the bench the whole game or whatever. It shouldn't even let me in the arena. Distributive justice, we saw how it worked there. But when it came to the political community, we just didn't know enough about the political community to really see how his theory of distributive justice would apply. But now we know a lot more about the political community. We know enough now to see how distributive justice applies in a political context. So that's what we're going to do in this video, see what Aristotle wants to say. And he really kind of pulls this together in Book 3, Chapter 9 of the Politics. So to remind you, of what we saw in Book 5 of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle claims that distributive justice follows a geometric proportion. And there's a geometric proportion for you. A geometric proportion of merit to the good that is being distributed. So the idea is, very, very quickly, the more merit that somebody has, the more of the good that they should receive. The less merit, the less of the good. Aristotle's idea is that certain communities, depends on the community, but right, communities have goods that fall to them to be distributed. How should they distribute them? How should they distribute those goods? Aristotle's answer, in accordance with merit, in a way that's proportional, right? So that those who have more merit receive more of the good in question, and those who have less receive less. And if you need a refresher on distributive justice, I would recommend going and watching the video from week 2. I think it's week 2. Okay, well, now we're talking about a political context. And so what are we interested in when it comes to politics? Well, what good are we interested in? Today, we tend to be and when we think about distributive justice, we tend to be most interested in things like wealth or money. That's not what Aristotle is, in fact, interested in. He thinks the most important good that's distributed by a political community is what he calls honor. That's what a political community distributes. That's really what he's concerned with. Yeah, political communities might also distribute money, maybe. That's actually somewhat controversial whether in Aristotle's day they did that. Some people deny that they did that, but whatever. But maybe they do that. That's not really what Aristotle's exercised by. He's really concerned with this question of how honors are distributed. And at first glance, you might think, well, I don't care. Honor, I mean, maybe it's just an old culture and the old honor culture, whatever. I don't know. I don't care about that. What he means by honor in this context is he's actually fairly clear about. He means something like political office. That's another way that Aristotle will talk about it. And what he really means by political office is like political power, the ability to make decisions or to do things within the political realm. We would refer to those things as things like political rights or political liberty. And so what he's really interested in when he's talking about distributions of honor, which to us seems just really foreign and not at all part of politics or relevant, it is. What he's really interested in is distributions of political rights, political liberties. Who should get rights? Who should get political liberties? Who should get political rights? Right? That's the question that he's trying to address when he talks about political distributive justice. Who should have the power to make these decisions? Another thing that we saw when we were looking at distributive justice earlier, and with the example of the basketball team, is that the merit is to be determined by the good of the community. And so the merit in the case of the basketball team was basketball skill, right? And so we distribute playing time proportional to skill. And so that's why I don't get any playing time, whereas someone like LeBron James would get all the playing time, right? And skill was the relevant merit, because by distributing playing time in that way, we best ensured that the team achieved its good, namely winning. Right? The good of the basketball team, the good of that community is winning games. You best achieve that good by distributing playing time relative to basketball skill, right? Merit is determined by the good of the community. Well, so now the question becomes, what's the merit relevant to distributions of honor and relevant to the political community? Now, one thing I want to be clear about, when Aristotle talks about political distributive justice, he's really only ever concerned with honor, with political power, political office, political liberties. As I had mentioned, however, there might be other goods that fall to a political community to distribute, such as money or wealth. What the merit for distributions of those other goods is may very well be different from what the merit is for distributions of honor. Merit is always determined by what best ensures that the community achieves its good. When it comes to distributions of political power, Aristotle claims that if we treat the merit as virtue, we will best ensure that we achieve the good of the political community. And the good of the political community, we know, and so we're going to look at this in more detail in just a second. But why we're in position to really understand Aristotle's ideas of political distributive justice is because we now know what the good of the political community is. Having gone through the genealogy of the city-state, we know that the good of the political community is living well. Right? That's going to be the key to unlocking how all this works. Honor, Aristotle is saying, needs to be distributed proportionate to one's virtue. That is to say, the more virtuous one is, the more political power one should have. And the less virtuous, the less political power one should have. Right? So when it comes to distributions of political power, the relevant merit is virtue. That's Aristotle's answer. And so a good political community is going to be one that distributes political power in precisely this way. And we're going to talk about what that community looks like in more detail next week. But we already know this much about it, right? We already know that a good political community is going to distribute political power relative to merit. But a very natural question to ask at this point is, well, why? How does treating the relevant merit as virtue best ensure that we achieve the common good? Because people might disagree. Take the oligarch that we had described in a previous video. Aristotle, his view of oligarchy, what the oligarch thinks is that political power should be distributed not according to merit, but according to wealth. That's what the oligarch thinks is just. Now, Aristotle thinks the oligarch is wrong about that wealth is not the relevant merit. But why not? Why is virtue the appropriate merit to single out and not wealth or something else? Why do we distribute political power relative to virtue? Why is that what makes for a good political community? Well, the key to seeing Aristotle's idea here is that the good of the community is living well. That's going to be the key. So Aristotle, in this context, will talk about the common good. And I've used that phrase in some other videos. The common good, as we now know, as Aristotle clarifies in the genealogy, the common good is simply living well, everybody living well, all of the people of the community living well, which is just to say, the common good is everyone's happiness, everyone's being happy. And we know what Aristotle thinks about happiness. It's virtuous rational activity. And so the common good of the political community is everybody's flourishing, everybody's happiness, everybody's living good human lives, everybody's engaging in virtuous rational activity. That's the common good, according to Aristotle. Because that's the good of the political community. That's what makes it so the relevant merit is virtue. The relevant merit when we are distributing political power is virtue. Aristotle goes on at length in 3.9. If the political community were a different kind of community, if the good of it were not, in fact, living well, then a different distribution may very well be appropriate. Virtue might very well not be the relevant merit. And he goes through, some people think that political communities exist simply to facilitate exchange, economic exchange, right? Facilitate an economy or something like that. Or to protect you from outside aggressors, make sure the Spartans don't kill us all or whatever it might be. And if those were the views that you had of the political community, Aristotle wants to say, well, yeah, it might be wise to distribute political power in a very different manner, right? If you thought the point of a political community was simply to protect yourself from outside aggression, well, then maybe you want to distribute political power to those who are most savvy with regard to militaristic affairs or something like that. So not according to virtue, but according to something else. And if you thought the purpose of a political community was to facilitate economic exchange, well, maybe you want to distribute political power then on the basis of, who's able best to do that, to people who have the best business acumen or something like that, right? So it makes all of the difference what we take the good of the political community to be. The good of the political community in actual fact, according to Aristotle, it's not facilitating economic exchange. It's not preventing outside aggression. Those, although those are two things that the political community does, but those aren't the good of the political community. That's not the common good. The common good is everyone's being engaging in virtuous rational activity. Well, so why does that necessitate treating virtue as the relevant merit? Well, there are two ways to answer that question. Two ways in which treating the relevant merit as virtue ensures that we achieve the common good. The first way is less important. The second way is more important. First way, by giving people who are more virtuous more political power, we help that person, the ruler, him or herself, live well. We further their own flourishing. Because Aristotle sees political power more generally, as a kind of tool that can be used in virtuous rational activity. And if you have power, you are more able to engage in virtuous rational activity. And you're able to engage in virtuous rational activity on a kind of grander, greater scale. And so by giving power to people who are particularly virtuous, we make their lives go better. We make them flourish to a greater degree. And well, look, they're part of everybody. They are a citizen too. They're part of the community. Their good is part of the common good. And so by giving them more political power, we further the common good in as much as we further their good. That's the first thing to say. That's the less important way. But that's still significant, Aristotle would say. The more important way is that virtuous people know better than non-virtuous people how to encourage and cultivate virtue. And that's the kind of person you're going to want in charge of a political community. Because the point of a political community, the good of a political community, is everybody engaging in virtuous rational activity. And so what you want your political rulers to do is help foster that kind of activity. Virtuous people are going to be much better at fostering that kind of activity than vicious people, if only in as much as they know what virtue requires. They know what virtue looks like. They know how they acquired it. Vicious people don't know that. Yeah, they can make a guess, but they're not reliable guides. And so, if the good of the political community is everybody's engaging in virtuous, rational activity, and if we want if we want to achieve that good, we want rulers in place who will help us achieve that, who will help everyone engage in virtuous, rational activity. And virtuous people are particularly well suited to doing that. That's why more political power should be given to those who are more virtuous, and less political power should be given to those who are less virtuous. That's how political liberty, rights, office, honor, as Aristotle puts it, should be distributed. That's what a distributively politically just community will look like. This is what a good political community will look like. This is how a good political community distributes political power.